Muy buenas tardes a todos.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Let's start our afternoon session of this conference. We are all Nazarenes. The civil war that started in Syria against the regime of Bashar al-Assad a few years ago has extended crisis everywhere in the region. No one at the time seemed to think of what the conflict was going to end up being, and some jihadist associations were a bit benefited first. Al-Qaeda then split from it, led to the Islamic State. Islamic extremism or fundamentalism has arrived to all the corners of Iraq and Syria. These are the figures: 215,000 dead, half of them civilians, out of them 7,000 women, 12,000 children, 6.5 million of internally displaced, 3.8 million of refugees. In Iraq, the situation is not better. Over 1.2 million people have been displaced from their homes, and there's at least 600,000 Iraqis that have had to fled. Some people have found themselves in between the crossfire, and there's the extremists that are trying to move away anyone that doesn't abide by their beliefs. His Beatitude, Mr. Ignatius Joseph III Yonan, who is the Patriarch of Antioch and the Bishop of Beirut, has lived very closely this tragedy, something that he has himself called a genocide. And without further ado, I would like to thank him for being here, and I'll give him the floor to share his testimony. Thank you very much. Your Beatitude. Thank you, Ignacio. I would have preferred to speak Spanish, but it's difficult. And so I'm going to speak in French. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of the OIR for having invited us to come to this conference organized in favor of and to champion the cause of Christians in the Middle East, either Pakistan, but also in Nigeria. Having said this, in those regions, there are many Christians that are being persecuted, and so thank you very much for inviting me. First of all, I would like to focus your attention to the fact that, I have come from the Middle East with together with the two bishops from Iraq, Joseph el-Bashar, and from Egypt, Angelinos, and also all of us. We find ourselves in the middle of this tragedy lived by our people, and that is suffered by our Christian communities, both in Iraq or in Syria, but also in other places, such as Lebanon. I would like to focus on the following 3 points. When I talk about a Christian community that's persecuted in Syria and in Iraq, I would not like to exclude the other religious minorities that have also been persecuted by the Muslim jihadist terrorist organizations. When I talk about the political Islam, I'm not against Islam as it is. I think, in fact, everyone is free to believe in their own religion, to live in freedom with this religion. But I'm talking here about the Islam that tries to impose the Sharia at a public level all over the country. And you all know that Sharia means Islamic law. And when I talk about Europe, I would like to recall, first of all, that there's a difference between the European peoples and their governments or the political authorities. The European peoples are waking up, such as you are, my dear friends, and are demanding from the government's responsibilities on what they have done and how they have managed to be involved in this bloodshed, in this destruction in the Middle East, or in Syria, or in Iraq, or in Yemen, or also in the north of Africa, Libya and Egypt. I would like to focus on 3 topics. First of all, the alarming situation of Christians in Syria and in Iraq, and tensions in Lebanon. You know very well what happened since last June. And you have chosen to take the word hate and in order to show your solidarity with the Christians of Iraq. We are all Nazarenes. Has been chosen, as it was mentioned in the Gospel, that Jesus was called a Nazarene, and the Muslims like to call us Nazarenes. However, the Christians from the Middle East, when we talk in Arabic, we prefer to be called Christians rather than Nazarenes. And I am sure that you have read in the Acts of the Apostles that the disciples of Christ were called Christians, Antioch Christians from Syria. You all know that the Middle East has been immersed in a spiral of incredible violence, nightmare that seems to have no limits, with conflicts that extend first because with using the excuse of liberating citizens or freeing citizens from the dictatorships, such as in the case of Saddam Hussein, or in the case of Syria, Bashar al-Assad. So these oppositions have become wars based on religions or based on fights between the conflicts between Sunnis or Shiites or Sunnis and Alawites. And all these conflicts have become international wars. In the case of Syria, Yemen, where we have fanatic bands, factions that have taken on the weapons and have renegated, and that want to reclaim their right to impose a Sunni political Islam that it's above all the other religions and against non-Muslims. And they have used this jihadism to try and annihilate the infidels, the non-believers that do not follow their creed, as the Prophet stated. We've also seen many fundamentalists that have destroyed full villages, trying to impose Sharia as they say it. So it is the confession, the creed, that is the most important. The Mahoma, the Islamic community at an international level, Daesh, Lustra, and other terrorist groups that have mobilized themselves quickly and unexpectedly before all the nations called civilized nations, when they saw all these extremists and how they fought so quickly. And this has been seen by the 5 continents of the globe. With that, of course, rejecting the opposition of all the popular bodies who champion we need to recognize here in Iraq and in Syria how the demographic element is important and how they attack the most vulnerable within those countries. There is a lack of political will, a lack of security everywhere where they lived. Those places that had no protection have become a clear victim for assassinations or displacement. Mosul and in other places in the plains of Kasab and others, the villages of Habud are examples of the targets of these attacks, without forgetting, of course, that Syria and Chaldea have suffered the greatest loss of people and of places of prayer and institutions due to mutinies and to violent attacks carried out by jihadism. I am sure that you have followed the terrible events that have taken place in Iraq for the last year, and they have continued being terrible and violent against other minorities like Ashahi and Habak. It's necessary to remember these Christians, the ones that have paid the highest price. After July, since the 10th of July, and also after the 6th of August last year, we suffered a kind of cataclysm that could undermine the survival of Mesopotamia. When I talk about the survival, I am not talking just merely about the persecution waves that Christians suffered. Christians have always been subject to it throughout history, but here we're talking about small churches such as the Chaldea Church or the Syrian Church. This is something really horrible, outrageous. When our communities emigrate, if our communities emigrate, it'll be very difficult for them to return to their the place of birth, And so for us, it's a question of survival. This terrible date of June and August, as you know, has led to the exodus of 150,000 Christians. I could mention, for instance, that if the 2 bishops of Erbil and Kirkuk, they know very well that they've had to take in many refugees, especially in our dioceses. The Catholic Syrian Church of Mosul has seen how its archbishop and more than 28 priests have had to take on refugees. Another church, Catholic Church of Chaldea, we've seen how the people, the believers, have been thrown away from their homes, from their villages, and they've had to take refuge in Kurdistan. We must acknowledge that at least a fourth of those that have taken exile have already left Iraq. They are either in Lebanon or in Jordan or in Turkey, or maybe some of them, in fact, have been accepted or have emigrated to other continents. Well, this is the situation in Iraq. And what could we say about Syria? Well, we must remember also that the situation in Syria for the last 4 years, over 4 years, is increasingly more difficult. There are countries, especially from Western countries, the US, France, the UK, and also from other EU states that have imposed sanctions and that hope that the regime will tumble down. But it's not the same as in Iraq. They are there to fight the extremists, the radicals. And they also believe that the regime of Bashar al-Assad will topple down. So we have a government, however, that has that the family of nations has decided together to do this, but they have not accepted it as they should have, and have asserted that this government, in their opinion, this regime will collapse in a few weeks or in a few months, and then the president will be punished. He will be sanctioned for having committed crimes against humanity. However, that started 4 years ago. But who paid the price at the time? 4 years ago, who paid the price for all this violence? Innocent people. Innocent people from all religions and all confessions. And as I have just said, Christians have always been, just as it was in Iraq, the most vulnerable community, because they are defenseless, they have no militias, and they do not want to take revenge. Christians in Syria, just as in Iraq, have to suffer all the horrible things that happen in these civil wars. And as religious leaders, we face a very difficult decision. What should we say to them? Remain in your homes, or stay in your country but be exposed to greater threat, to greater oppression? Or should we tell them, should we give them the freedom to leave, so that at least they can ensure having a more dignified future for them and their children? All in all, I can say that what Christians have suffered in Syria for over now 4 years, and in Iraq for many, many years. Remember that next October we will celebrate the 4th anniversary of the horrible attack to our Notre Dame Cathedral, the Cathedral Notre Dame de la Délivrance in Baghdad. In that attack, 48 people died. There were 48 martyrs, amongst them 2 young priests. And so this was on the eve of the Day of All Saints in 2010. It was... So this October will be the 5th anniversary, I correct myself, and I hope I'll be able to go there to pray at that day of martyrdom in Baghdad. So as I have said, we are now in a very difficult situation. Not only can we pray, with our refugees. We have seen them, we have visited them in several occasions in Iraq. And I have, in fact, just visited for 5 days Syria. In fact, I went to homes in the central city, and everywhere we are asked, they tell me, please, Patriarch, what do you think about our future here? Will we be able to resume a normal life? Bearing in mind all this conflict and these groups that hate us from the from the deep of their heart, they hate us from the bottom of their heart. And the Sunnis, the Shiites, the Salawites, and other minorities are suffering this. We have become hostages, whether in Iraq or in Syria. This is the situation. Let's not talk about the situation in Lebanon. This small country of 10,500 square kilometers for many centuries has been open to Europe, has been the gate to Europe, has also been pioneer in the Arab Renaissance. Many writers, many Arab writers were Christians, and Christians, they educated and taught others. Of course, there was always in Lebanon a majority of Muslims that gave them confidence in their belief that they were Arab cultures or Turkish Ottoman cultures. This small country has many problems, has many tensions, has had tensions for many years now, and haven't been able to choose a president. According to the alliance or the governmental pact between Muslims and Christians, the president of the republic must be a Maronite Catholic, and the prime minister must be a Sunni Muslim. The president of parliament must be a Shia Muslim, and the Shia and the Sunni do not agree, and each group creates alliances with a different country from the region, the Shia with Iran, the Sunni with Saudi Arabia. And because of that, we are unable to choose a president for our country. The parliament is half-half Christian, who's in alliance with the Sunni, and others are in alliance with the Shia. And also we have many other problems. The jihadist terrorists, what we call, namely the Al-Nusra group, which acts in the border with Syria and in the mountains, and they aim to attack the Lebanese army or the villages near the border. The army has to defend itself also. In Libya, we have 4.5 million inhabitants, according to the latest census, and 1.5 million are Syrian refugees, of which at least 90% are Sunni Muslims. These refugees, which account for nearly a quarter of the total population, cause many problems in the demographic balance and the confessional balance or the creed balance of Lebanon. Also, well, since the year 48, we have to add to this the Palestine refugees, which are 1.5 million refugees from Palestine, who are in refugee camps, but most of them are Sunni too, and this leads to a great problem regarding this balance. And that's why there's so much tension in Lebanon. And in the south of Lebanon, we have soldiers from the UNIFIL, and I would like to thank Spain for having sent troops, Spanish troops, and this mission of the United Nations in order to maintain and in order to carry out peacekeeping operations in the south of Lebanon. These troops, these Spanish troops, have really have really shown their vocation and their Christian vocation through their solidarity with all the population of the southern of Lebanon, in its majority Muslim population. In fact, 2 months ago, one of the Spanish soldiers was assassinated by a missile, and in fact his service was thanked by the King of Spain during the Easter holidays. And so thank you, or the Easter festivities. Thank you very much. Now let's move on to the second pillar, which is the political Islam, like I called it before. It is the origin of all the problems that Christians have in the Middle East. And why? Because in Islam we have no separation between religion and the state. Muslims believe that in the sacred book they give an answer to all questions, whether a religious answer, an economic question, or social, or even a sport question. They believe all the answers are in the book, and that means that we have to face many difficulties. How can we persuade the young generations so that they stay linked to the roots, to the countries of origin, when they see that this radical movement continues to expand, continues to progress, and they carry out all kinds of actions through the internet, etc. And they even recruit jihadists from everywhere. And they also have money from these rich countries, rich because of oil. So youngsters are not very optimistic about the future, and that's when if we manage to separate religion from the state, as Christians will be better. Without that separation, we'll be at risk of dying. It's not that we want to impose our religion on the others. It's not because we believe we are better than the others, as they may say it, but because we live in the 21st century. We do not live in the 7th century anymore, and we face this tragedy that has fallen upon us, and then we have people from those countries where most population is Muslim, and they do not accept the others. There are occasions in which they say it. They recite some verses from their book, or they talk about tolerance. Mercy, but only in words. The religion has given sentences. The religion of the state has to be Islam. The religion of the president has to be Islam. Islam is the main source of laws in the country. And here we find constitutions that champion discrimination against religious minorities. Not only Christians, but also other minorities. And in fact, we know very well how the peoples of the Middle East are asked to take a revenge against the West, and they see us Christians as a link to the West because of the religion, and so we are destined to be hated by their people. Unfortunately, in order to have a real dialogue of a real coexistence, it's actually very difficult looking at the evolution of those countries and how they're becoming more and more radical. Believe me when I say that this is not a theory that I am presenting. This is a reality that as Christians from the Middle East, we have to live with every day. I know that my brothers and sisters in Pakistan, they also suffer a lot, and they suffer the great oppression due to their faith. The same in Nigeria, and we congratulate them for being loyal to Jesus. In the Middle East, for centuries now, we Christians have believed on the word of Jesus. It's not just about the bread that we must have in order to survive. If we're thinking only about surviving in this land, then we wouldn't be there. We do not just want to survive. These problems wouldn't be there. We would have converted to Islam one way or the other.
We believe that our ancestors have always believed that we must be loyal to Jesus, and they have accepted their persecution and their suffering, the pressure that they are under due to their faithfulness, their loyalty to the gospel. So, dear friends, it is necessary to put an end to what has been talked about this morning, the hypocrisy of the Western governments. I would want to go even further than that, indeed, and say that this is a kind of Machiavellian opportunism that we can see in the Western governments, particularly the United States, France, and England. Their leaders, if they continue to cause problems and putting up barriers for institutions who are there, this is going to favor the belligerent forces. If they continue to send weapons and allow the jihadists and even send the fact that people from their countries are going to join the jihad. The Pope Francis can also be criticized, and our silence can be criticized because we are all accomplices. They are accomplices in that they are distorting the sentiment of their people. And I must say that the Mediterranean is not an obstacle, it is not a barrier. The Mediterranean should be a bridge which links Europe with the Near East. Europe should have a much more positive role in order to be able to intervene and invite all the parties, and I know this is not easy, I know that it's not easy, but they should be invited to a true dialogue, to reconciliation, and above all to stop the sending of weapons to these groups of jihadists, which, when in certain cases, have been called the moderate opposition. I don't know if I have any more time, but I would like to tell you a short anecdote in English.
90 years old, he was invited to give some words at a banquet for in benefit of the priests whom I knew.
¿Qué está escuchando? Es que no sé. A ver. ¿Es inglés? ¿Está hablando inglés?
Words nice, his experience as a priest. Then he said, look, when you
So when we call upon you to give you a talk,
to be heard and shut up to be appreciated.
Thank you very much, Your Beatitude. I just wanted to ask you a couple of if you have the strength. Thank you. One is, would you say that the Christianity is in danger? Do you think that in several decades there is a risk that Christians will be no more in the Middle East, in countries like Iraq or Syria? There's a real threat for that?
Look, Ignacio, this year is the centennial anniversary of that genocide of Armenians, Syriac, Chaldeans in then the Ottoman Empire, 1915. And you know that Asia Minor, Turkey, was full of Christians. Now, if you go there as tourist, you visit only ruins. And I myself come from a family who fled Turkey right after the First World War. My parents were children, mother and father, 10 years old, and fled to Syria, where I was born. Now, in whole Turkey, you don't have more than 50,000 Christians, over 80 millions. And Mr. Erdogan just said that I could, expel 100,000 of Armenians still living in Turkey. I'm sorry, that's not the whole truth. There is no such a number. Mainly, Christians live in Istanbul, and the largest community, I tell you, they are the Syrian Orthodox, then the Armenian, not more than 6,000 each church. We have there a community, Syriac Catholics, with 2 priests, and our patriarchal see in southeastern Turkey was what we call boycotted and converted into museum till now. So, said, of course, we're going to be there, but for how many and how long? You can't say that now in Turkey you have Christians. Yes, when I go, I've been there as a patriarch 4 times. They make kind of propaganda, receiving a patriarch. They assign some security for me, but afterward, what is there? There is no Christian presence in Turkey. And we fear that the same thing in Iraq and in Syria. Not in Lebanon, we hope not going to be to happen, because there Christians can defend themselves. But this is a reality. Now we have Egypt, of course, another situation in Egypt, God bless them. But in Iraq and Syria, we really are, facing emptying of Christians of those countries.
Another question. You mentioned that you visit frequently your communities from Syria and Iraq to offer them your support and be with them with their suffering. Could you tell us a little bit more how do these Christians live today in Syria and Iraq? So is their faith strong? Do they risk to maybe to change religion or to flee like others have already done? How do they live their faith? And what's their physical situation right now?
As you said, we keep, as patriarchs, visiting our flock, not only in Lebanon, but also in Iraq, in Syria. In Iraq, Bishop Yusuf and Bashar will be more entitled to speak about the present situation. But what I know, that they are in a kind of despair. That means it's not easy to be expelled from your houses, your lands, without nothing, and it's already over 10 months from Mosul, over 8 months from the plain of Nineveh. They are living a kind of real, their situation under tents first, then caravan, I don't know, and now they did rent for them apartment where 2-3 families live in the same apartment. As now we have refugees in Lebanon. For us, we have at least 3,000 families from Iraq. Now, regarding Syria, I was last just 4 weeks ago to visit central Syria. Of course, it's not so what we call optimistic situation. That means people, especially the young people, they are falling in despair. They don't know how long the conflict, the fighting will go on, and what's going to happen for Syria will be divisions, as some powerful nation predicting, or it will be reunited. But of course, they all are striving for peace and reconciliation, but it's not easy.
Do you think is it possible to dialogue with, first with moderate Muslims, but also with jihadists? Do you think that any of them are open to change their mind, or is it absolutely impossible? So these terrorist groups, these terrorist people, the people who support them, do you think there is any chance that they can change their mind?
As long as we have no separation of religion and state, it will be very, very difficult. Now, what's the alternative? The alternative is to have a kind of strong regime that would keep everybody in her post and applying equality to all citizens, and don't spread the hatred, especially in the speeches, in the mosques, in the gatherings against other. That was, for instance, the examples, what we call, or the situation under Saddam Hussein, the dictator, and also it's the situation in Syria. It's better to have a dictatorship where everybody is equal to others, and where you have to, let's say, abide by the law of the country than having a totalitarianism based on the Islamic religion. When you have totalitarianism, that means you have discrimination against others, especially the most vulnerable among religious minorities.
That's very hard to listen. But that's what you have suffered in the last years, and that you explained so vividly. Thank you for that. And one last question. This is just really the last one. What can we do, the Western world, Spanish people, Spain, in favor of your flock, in favor of Christians from Lebanon, from Iraq, and from Syria? How can we help?
I think we need, first of all, honesty, sincerity by harmonizing words and deeds, not just giving nice wording or political correct language. Okay, you are so such and such, and we accept you like you are, and that's it. First of all, you have to, in the European Union, you have to really synchronize your decision or the step to be done. Not only those who are powerful or they have more interest in that region running after the petrodollars that will make the decision. And of course, you got to be living the Christian solidarity toward those who are suffering.
Thank you very much. Your beatitude, it's been an honor to have you here, and we're hoping to keep on talking to you in the following days. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.